and welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. I'm Yogesh Kottavar and I'll be taking up daily news analysis of The Hindu and Indian Express. We'll discuss 5 most important articles from these two newspapers in a comprehensive manner. The first article mentioned on page number 8 of Indian Express. It talks about Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Recently, this scheme has completed 10 years and it is one of the most successful scheme run by the government of India. So we'll understand it in detail. The second article mentioned on the explained page of Indian Express. It talks about bail given under Prevention of Money Laundering Act to K. Kavita. So we'll understand the clause in detail. The next article mentioned on the same page of Indian Express, it talks about fixed dose combination drugs. Recently, Government of India has banned 156 fixed dose combination drugs. So we'll understand what are these drugs and why government has banned them. The next article mentioned on page number 4 of The Hindu. It talks about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Recently, a statue of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj collapsed in Sindhudurg district of Maharashtra. So we'll understand the history and role of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. The next article mentioned on page number 12 of The Hindu. It talks about Project Cheetah. Recently, a cheetah which was relocated from Africa to India has died in India. So we will understand what is Project Cheetah and Kuno National Park where this incident has occurred. After this, we'll also discuss some practice questions so that you will get a good idea about what kind of questions can be expected in the examination. So let's get started. The first article is about Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Recently, this scheme of government has completed 10 successful years. And this scheme is considered to be one of the most successful scheme brought by Modi government since the year 2014. So we'll understand this scheme in detail and the core objective of this scheme to bring financial inclusion. So we'll understand what is financial inclusion. If you look at the syllabus, Mains GS paper 3 talks about inclusive growth, and you cannot bring inclusive growth without financial inclusion. So this topic becomes very, very important. Moving ahead, look at this previous year question. It says, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana was launched by the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, on 28 August 2014. What is the main objective of the scheme? To provide housing loan to poor people at cheaper interest rates, to promote women's self-help groups in backward areas, to promote financial inclusion in the country, and to provide financial help to marginalized communities. So it's a very easy question that was asked in the year 2015. So you can expect such questions. Now moving ahead, what is the context? We said that the scheme has completed 10 years and we call this scheme as one of the most important schemes, and it is going to bring financial inclusion. So first of all, what is financial inclusion? See, if you look at any country, let's say for example India, there are many people living in India and some people are at the upper level of the society. So they are upper class, then there are some at the middle class, some at the lower strata, and some even lower than that lower strata. So if you observe the economic activities that are taking place, and if you look at the banking or credit facilities or insurance facilities, most of those facilities are benefited only by some chunk of that society. There are many people in the same society who are not taking any benefit out of these insurance or banking and all those things. Now, one of the reasons could be that they are not having access to these financial mechanisms. For example, there is a farmer who doesn't have access to the formal banking sector, and that is the reason he is not able to get loans from the commercial banks. So we are saying that financial inclusion is to bring all of these individuals, all of the businesses as well as all of the individuals living in a particular society or country under the financial umbrella of that country. So we want everyone should have the access to financial mechanisms in the country. Now, if everyone is part of the same financial mechanism, in that case, what will happen is that everyone will become part of the formal economic banking network. Now, this will lead to many things. First of all, there will be economic stability, there will be reduced poverty, and there will be higher inclusive growth. Why we are saying that? Because if some sections will not be part of this formal sector, then there is a chance that economically their situation will degrade. So this is very important. Now, to bring financial inclusion, first we will be focusing on providing the access to the services. So for example, we have this credit system wherein some institutions provide loans. The banks provide, the NBFCs provide loans. There is insurance, there are payments, there are remittances. All these facilities, for that you should have access. Now, if you go to rural areas, do you find banking institutions in rural areas? Most of the rural areas do not have that. So we first want the access to be provided in these regions. Second, there should be affordability. Even if the services are there, but they are not affordable to the marginalized sections of the society, they are not going to take benefit out of it. So government wants that it should also be very much affordable. You can take example of UPI. To make any transaction through UPI, you do not need to pay any kind of fees. So this is a good example of financial inclusion. Then third, we want to bring financial literacy. See, financial literacy is very important. If you do not know about these institutions, if you do not know about these schemes, all those mechanisms, then how can you take benefit out of it? So the knowledge part is also important. Then many a times we see some scams go on. For example, someone calls you, says that I'm going to send you some amount of money. Can you tell me the OTP? So this kind of scam is very common in India. But we need the consumer protection. We need to have consumer education, and we need to build a trust in this vulnerable population who is still not part of your financial umbrella. If you build the trust, then they will become part of the system. Then we can also focus on this digital financial services. So for example, you look at UPI, net banking, or any other mechanism which is being provided online. So this digital service can be provided to every individual living in India. This is all about financial inclusion. This is the larger objective. Now moving forward, we will look at the key features of this Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. First of all, this scheme brought zero balance accounts. Government said that if you do not have any bank account, we will open a bank account for you. And this account will be a zero balance bank account. So you do not need to have any amount in it. Still, it will be an account opened and it will operate. Second thing, government said that will provide RuPay debit cards to you. Now this RuPay debit card will provide access to many financial services, including one insurance. This accidental insurance coverage will also be provided. Next, there is this overdraft facility. See, if you have a bank account in which you have put 10,000 rupees, you may think that you can withdraw only 10,000. I say that you can withdraw even 20,000. How? Because the bank provides you overdraft facility up to rupees 10,000. So what it means? Even if you do not have any amount in your bank account, bank will provide you some additional amount as a short loan. So this will act as a short loan which you will get for a very short time period. But at least you're getting it, right? So this is overdraft. And then government said we will go for direct benefit transfer. Now, if you look at Indian history after the independence, Government of India has tried to bring many subsidies, many schemes in which government tried to send some amount of money to an individual. But what used to happen is that if government is sending rupees 100, the person used to get only 16 rupees. Rest of the amount used to go in the hands of the corrupt officials or politicians. So this corruption is a big phenomena. Now here government said that now we'll go for direct benefit transfer, wherein we will send the entire amount in the bank account of this person directly. And this government is doing because government has already linked three things. First is this Jan Dhan account, bank account. Second is your Aadhaar card. And third is your mobile number. All these three are already linked. So this we call as JAM Trinity. JAM Trinity. So this is leading to direct benefit transfer. The amount is getting directly benefited by the individuals. Now, if you look at the key achievements of this Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, why we are calling it as a successful scheme. First of all, if you look at the data till August 2024, total 53.13 crore accounts have been already opened. And if you look at the data from Indian adults' perspective, out of all the Indian adults, 80% have bank account at this stage right now, which is a very good thing. Second, there is a focus on rural and semi-urban areas. So if you look at whatever number of accounts that have been opened through this scheme, 66% of those accounts have been opened in rural and semi-urban areas. Now this is very important because rural areas, if you look at them, usually there are no banking facilities available in the rural areas. So it's a good move, we can say. Third, there is empowerment of women. How we are saying that? Because the total accounts which are opened through this scheme includes 55% accounts of women members. So women members are now participating in the financial transactions or the financial market, and this will give a greater control over their own lives. So this is empowerment of women. Then there is a growth in the saving. If you look at the data, earlier 1065 rupees is the average amount which was there deposited in the bank accounts of the people. And now in the year 2024, we see the amount has increased to 4352. So this is the time when this scheme started and this is the present time. So you see the amount has increased. That means the savings among the people of India is increasing. Okay. Now moving forward, what are the challenges? First of all, there is a challenge of over-indebtedness. What does this mean? Now you have brought many new individuals in the banking sector. So there are many banks who will offer them some kind of credits. They'll say we will provide you some kind of loans. So this person may take up those loans. Sometimes people take up loans and they are not even capable of paying back those loans. So in that case, there will be indebtedness. So what you need to do is that, first of all, those banks or those NBFCs, you need to regulate them so that they should not give more loan. They need to check whether the person can pay back that loan, and after that they should give that loan. Second, you need to give education to these individuals who are the newcomers. This education is called as financial education, which is very important. Then we need to strengthen consumer protection. We said that there is possibility of scams. In that case, you need to have a very strong legal framework through which you can ensure consumer protection, because the trust of consumers is the most important thing in the market. Then you need to look at the future, wherein the next phase of this Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana should focus on the overall empowerment of the vulnerable population. For example, you should go for promoting entrepreneurship among women and the marginalized sections of the society, and this will be the real empowerment. Okay. Now, the future plan, the government is saying that we have an ambitious target. The target is to open up total 3 crore bank accounts in the year 2024-2025. So this is a very ambitious target, and we can say that this shows government's commitment towards bringing formalization or towards bringing individuals to the formal banking sector. The next article is about the bail of K. Kavita. Recently, K. Kavita has got bail under the exceptional clause of PMLA, that is Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So we will study this act and the bail provision related to it. This topic is important from syllabus perspective, prelims as well as mains. In GS paper 3, the syllabus specifically mentions about money laundering. So the topic is highly important. Now look at this previous year question. It says, money laundering poses a serious security threat to a country's economic sovereignty. What is its significance for India, and what steps are required to be taken to control this menace? Now this is a very good question. Such comprehensive question requires comprehensive understanding to answer. So you must be ready for this. Now moving forward, what is the case? So there is a case going on, Delhi excise policy scam case, in which Arvind Kejriwal has been arrested, Manish Sisodia was arrested, and even K. Kavita was arrested. K. Kavita is a politician who is leader of Bharat Rashtra Samiti party from Telangana. She is daughter of former Chief Minister of Telangana. So she is an influential lady. Now, she has been alleged with money laundering charges by CBI and ED. So these two agencies are involved here. Now, first of all, what is money laundering in simple terms? Money laundering means if you have some kind of black money and you want to convert it into white money. You don't want people to know that you have black money. They should consider it as white money. This process is named as money laundering. But for that, you need to understand what is black money. See, if you are earning money from legitimate sources, good sources, that is white money. You are paying taxes on it, that's a white money. But if you do not pay the taxes on your money, you have evaded the taxes, then that money is black money. Secondly, if you are earning money from some illegitimate sources, for example, you are running a criminal organization, and from that organization you are getting money. So that business altogether is an illegal business. Government does not allow that. So the amount of money you have got is also black money. Now what you try to do is that you try to show that this is not a black money, this is white money. So it will appear as legitimate. And how you will do that? You will do multiple transactions. Let's say, for example, I have 10 crore rupees. I will distribute that money in a network which includes many individuals. For example, there are 1 lakh people in it. So these people will take thousand rupees. They will put this money in their banks. They will buy some assets. They will make multiple transactions. After that, the same amount of money will come to a particular NGO or a company. So the entire process, which is run in an organized manner, leads to the same money coming back to my account, but now it will appear as a white money. Okay, it looks like someone has paid it to me. So this is money laundering, very complicated kind of a thing. Now here we have an act, that is Prevention of Money Laundering Act, which was brought in the year 2002 by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. And it said that we are going to criminalize anyone who goes for money laundering. So you will be charged with criminal charges. Now if you look at the bail provisions, in any case in India, bail is the norm and jail is the exceptions. Means normally you will get the bail, but if you have done something very horrible, in that case the Supreme Court or any other court will not give you bail and they will put you in the jail. This is the normal thing. But when a case has been registered under Prevention of Money Laundering Act, in that case actually bail is not the norm, rather jail is the norm. That means you will not easily get the bail. Here if you look at this section 45(1), it says that the court should be convinced that the person is not at all guilty and he will not commit such crime or such offense again. Only in that case court can provide bail. So it's a very stringent and strict provision. Then the agencies such as ED or CBI, they can attach your property. That means if you have some kind of property and PMLA has been assigned, here you are saying that the ED has put charges against you under PMLA, then they can take up your property before the trial, or the trial is still going on. Still your property has been completely confiscated. It is allowed. Third, the burden of proof is there with the accused person. What does this mean? See, if you go to the court and say that this person has done something wrong to me, then you have to prove to the court that this person has done something wrong. I have to give the proof or evidence. But in the case of PMLA, here the burden of proof lies on the accused person. If agency says that this person has done something wrong, then that person will have to prove that I am not the accused one. I am completely out of this guilty phenomena, or rather, I have not done anything wrong as such. So this is very important. Now what has happened in the recent case of K. Kavita? There is an exceptional provision given in the same act. If you look at the section 45(1) clause, it says that if there is women, minors or infirm, then in that case they will get some kind of exception from this bail provision mentioned in PMLA. That means they will have some lenient bail conditions. Now here this infirm means a person who is not physically or mentally strong. For example, there is an old person whose health condition is not that good. So we are saying you will get some kind of relief. So what was the logic? The logic is that if you look at the gender angle, age angle and the health angle, this angle makes a person vulnerable, and vulnerable people should have some lenient mechanisms available. That was the idea. And what judiciary has said, judiciary has considered K. Kavita as a vulnerable woman, and that's why she has been granted the bail. Now the question arises, is K. Kavita a vulnerable woman? Because she's a politically influential person. She's highly educated. How can you call her a vulnerable person? So the interpretation of judiciary comes into picture, wherein judiciary looks at the broader picture of gender injustice that takes place in India or any part of the world. So here court is saying that the gender injustice is a broader issue, a big issue, and that's why any women will be part of this. So we are saying that women is vulnerable, even if she is a very influential kind of woman. And this kind of interpretation or this precedent will set an example for the further cases which will be brought under the PMLA Act. So we are considering this particular judgment or bail a very important precedent. The next article is about fixed dose combination drugs. Recently, Government of India has banned 156 fixed dose combination drugs. So we'll understand what are those drugs and why government has done that. If you look at the syllabus, this can be asked in prelims as well as mains. Look at this previous year question. It says, which of the following are the reasons for the occurrence of multi-drug resistance in microbial pathogens in India? First, genetic predisposition of some people. Second, taking incorrect doses of antibiotics to cure diseases. Third, using antibiotics in livestock farming. And fourth, multiple chronic diseases in some people. So this one is a conceptual question and you should have a conceptual clarity on such topics. Now look at the context. See, Government of India is on a mission mode to eliminate and regulate the irrational players in the market. If someone is bringing some kind of drug, when we say drug, it means some kind of medicine. For example, some kind of syrup or a tablet, etc. If there is a private player who is bringing an irrational kind of tablet or syrup in the market, government is now going to regulate it or eliminate it. And as a part of the same mission, government has now banned 156 fixed dose combination drugs. So what is this fixed dose combination drug? Just like any other medicine, this fixed dose combination drug includes a tablet or capsule or a syrup. But it is different in this manner that it includes ingredients which are more than one. So for example, if you got fever, you take a tablet which can cure you from this fever. But if there is a tablet which can cure you from multiple disorders or multiple symptoms, so you do not need to take multiple medicines. Just one medicine will work for multiple symptoms. So from patient's perspective, it looks very good. But government is saying that this is going against the interest of public health. Now, if you look at the tuberculosis, diabetes, many times we heard that these fixed dose combination drugs are given. But now government is saying that there are many private players who have brought irrational kind of drugs. What government is saying? These FDCs, most of these FDCs, either they do not work well together or they could even harm the patient. And now government is saying that this is also leading to antibiotic resistance. Now what is antibiotic resistance? If you take one tablet today, next time if you get the same disease, you need more than one tablets. Maybe you need one tablet plus one injection. So the same virus or the same bacteria will not die by the same medicine. You need more dose. So this is the resistance developed by your body. And this is being caused due to the use of FDCs. Second thing, government has said that there is a pricing mechanism brought by government. Government says that if there is a private sector and they are bringing price in such a manner that they are increasing price consistently and public is not even able to afford the medicines, in that case government can come into picture and they can bring a pricing mechanism wherein they will put a ceiling limit on the price. Now here what these companies, pharmaceutical companies have done, they have used these FDCs as a strategy to circumvent these pricing mechanisms. For example, government gave a list of tablets on which government put a pricing limit. Then after that, the pharmaceutical company brought a new tablet, this FDC, and said that it is not part of this list. So this pricing mechanism will not apply on it. So it is kind of a strategy to make profit. Now government has clearly banned many of these FDCs. What patients can specifically do is that, first of all, if you have already consumed such tablets or syrups, now ensure that next time whenever you go to the doctor, ask for some kind of alternatives. And if you look at the impact for the past consumptions, it is very much low. So you do not need to worry about whatever amount of fixed dose combination drugs you have already consumed. Next time, don't do it. Okay. The next article is about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Recently, a statue of Shivaji Maharaj collapsed in Maharashtra, after which Indian Navy has raised some concerns related to the construction and the collapse of this statue. So we need to study who is Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and what is his relation with the Maratha Empire. This topic is important from the syllabus prelims perspective as well as mains GS paper 1 Indian history, which includes the medieval modern history and the art and culture part. Now look at this previous year question. It says, clarify how mid-18th century India was beset with the spectre of a fragmented polity. Now here the fragmented polity means Indian polity is divided among many kingdoms who are fighting against each other. So such broad questions can be asked in the examination. Now moving forward, what is the context? We are seeing that the statue has got collapsed, after which a case has been registered against the contractor and the structural consultant. Now here we need to understand that this statue was unveiled by the Prime Minister Modi 8 months back, and that's why it has now become a big news. So this is the image of this particular statue. Now, who is Shivaji Maharaj or Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj? See, he is the founder of Maratha Empire. He started the Maratha Empire. Earlier, he was not a king, but in the year 1674, he crowned himself as a king and he was leading the idea of Swaraj. He said that there should be rule of people, the people of the land, and that's why he is considered to be people's king in this region. Now, he crowned himself on the Raigad fort, which is very famous in Maharashtra. And why Shivaji Maharaj is very famous is because of his tactical skills, his warfare skills. For example, he made use of guerrilla warfare. What is guerrilla warfare? Let's say, for example, there is a king who has army of 10 lakh people and he is going to lead a war against a king who has army of just 10,000 people. So in a conventional war, this king cannot win. But if he goes for guerrilla warfare, he might win. So what he will do? He will make use of this small army in such a manner that he will go for tactical attacks. So they will attack on the supply lines of the enemy. They will make use of these mountains or forest where these people used to live earlier. They will make use of it in such a manner that they will attack in a sabotaging manner. So through this guerrilla warfare, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj actually ensured that Maratha Empire remains stable against the Mughal Empire or the British Empire or even the Portuguese invasions. Now here a core role of their navy comes into picture. If you go back to that time, there was no Indian king who had brought its navy. But Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was the first Indian king who developed its official navy. So they wanted that their navy should ensure that the coastal areas of Maharashtrian region should be defended against the invasions of Britishers and Portuguese. Now moving forward, what he did is he promoted the Marathi culture. He made use of the language Marathi and Sanskrit in his court and the administration. Also, there is a very much influence of Shivaji Maharaj on the Maratha Empire even after his death. He acts as an inspiring figure for every Maratha warrior. So here you see, after the death of Shivaji Maharaj in 1680, the empire still continued growing. So you see the map in 1680 when Shivaji Maharaj was there, the empire size is this much. But by 1740, when the king is Maratha Empire king is Bajirao Peshwa, the size of the empire is this much, which shows that it has expanded to almost the size of the subcontinent of India. Now moving forward, what is the news? Indian Navy has raised some concerns because this statue was unveiled on the Navy Day. And now the government of the state said that this statue, when it was being constructed, it was being oversawn by the Indian Navy. So they are responsible. And now government is saying that we will build a new statue of a bigger statue on the same location to resolve this issue. The next article is about cheetahs. Recently, one cheetah died in Kuno National Park, which is in Madhya Pradesh. And this has raised concerns related to the Project Cheetah, which is run by Government of India. And this happened in Kuno National Park, so we will read some facts related to Kuno National Park. If you look at the syllabus, this question can be asked in prelims as well as mains. In mains, GS paper 3 mentions about environmental conservation. So the topic is important. And if you look at this previous year question, it says, recently there was a proposal to translocate some of the lions from their natural habitats in Gujarat to which one of the following sites? Corbett National Park, Kuno Palapur Wildlife Sanctuary, Mudumalai Wildlife Sanctuary, Sariska National Park. So such factual questions can be asked in the examination. Now moving forward. First of all, when we look at cheetah as a species, we see that cheetah used to exist in India naturally. Earlier it used to exist, but with time we observed that this species got extinct. And how it got extinct? Because of multiple reasons, one of which is hunting. Many kings used to hunt cheetahs, and this overhunting led to removal of this species from this area of India. Second, the area where this species live is named as grassland, and this grassland has been converted into agricultural lands in many parts of India. So what happened is that cheetah lost its habitat, its home. So due to which also we see there is a decrease in the population, and after some time it got completely extinct. Now after that, government thought that extinction of this species is not a good thing for the ecosystem. Why? Because in an ecosystem, one species is dependent on the other one is dependent on the other one. So if you look at this phenomena, the grass is eaten by a grasshopper, or let's say for example any animal is eating a grass. That animal, that herbivorous animal is eaten by a carnivorous animal. That carnivorous animal, which includes cheetahs, tigers, etc., that will be eaten by a vulture. So this is called a food chain or a food web. And we are saying that in the ecosystem, every species is dependent on the other. So if cheetahs got extinct, that's not a good news for the entire grassland. So government thought that what we'll do, we will bring some cheetahs from Africa and bring it in India. So they saw that Kuno National Park is a good place. It is very similar to the African region, especially the Namibian region of Africa, where cheetahs are already there. So they thought that we'll bring some cheetahs from Namibia to Kuno National Park. So government started this Project Cheetah. When government said that in 2020, they started this project, and they said we will bring at least 50 cheetahs in next 5 years. And they said that because the climatic conditions of Kuno National Park are very much similar to Namibian area, so we can ensure that these cheetahs will live a good life over here too. Further, they built this institution, National Tiger Conservation Authority. Now please remember, this NTCA was brought in to implement Project Tiger, and the same authority was now given the task of implementing Project Cheetah. So there is no different agency, but the same agency which is working here. So now if you look at Kuno National Park, it is in Madhya Pradesh. If you look at the map of Madhya Pradesh, at the top corner here you will see Kuno National Park. So it is in the Shivpur district of Madhya Pradesh, and it is near this Vindhyan Hills, and there is a river called Kuno River, from which it has got its name Kuno National Park. Earlier it was a wildlife sanctuary, but in the year 2018 it was made national park. Why? Because to translocate the cheetahs from Africa to India, this was needed. If you look at this national park, there are many species. If you look at this vegetation such as Kardai, Salai, khair, these are the famous trees in this area. Then if you look at the fauna, it includes sloth bear, leopard, Indian wolf, striped hyena, dhole, etc. So there are many species in this area. Now, what could be the way forward? Because we saw there is a trend in which many such cheetahs which have been translocated, they are dying. So first of all, we need to comprehensively reassess the suitability of Kuno National Park. We need to check whether it is really suitable as a habitat for cheetahs. Secondly, we need to have a monitoring mechanism, a very strong monitoring mechanism where we can check what these cheetahs are doing. Then third, we need to take help of the local communities in that area as well as the international experts who can give us good insights about what is exactly happening in this. And next, we can go for some periodical reviews and we can go for a long-term strategy as we are anyway going to translocate total 50 cheetahs in future. So now we'll discuss some practice questions. Question number 1. Recently, India launched Project Cheetah to reintroduce cheetahs into the wild. Which of the following national parks is the primary site for this reintroduction? Please pause the video and answer in comment, after which anyway I am going to tell you the answer. So here, Ranthambore National Park, Jim Corbett National Park, Kuno National Park, Kaziranga National Park. The answer is obviously Kuno National Park, which we have anyway discussed. Then consider the following statements about Kuno National Park. First, Kuno's vegetation is predominantly desert with very few trees and minimal plant diversity. Absolutely wrong. We said that this area is a grassland. Cheetah also needs grassland. So it is not a desert as such, and it is in the Madhya Pradesh region. So please remember, this is a wrong fact. Second, the fauna is limited to small herbivores and does not include large predators like the Indian leopard, sloth bear or Indian wolf. So we must remember that yes, Indian leopard is part of it, sloth bear is also, Indian wolf is also part of this Kuno National Park. So this statement is also wrong. So the answer would be D, neither 1 nor 2. Question number 3. Which of the following statements regarding fixed dose combination drugs is or are correct? First, fixed dose combination drugs contain more than one active ingredient in a single dosage form. That's absolutely true. Second, FDCs are primarily used to treat single symptoms or conditions that require only one drug. This is wrong. We said that it will treat multiple symptoms. That's why we are calling it fixed dose combination drug. This combination part is coming into picture. So second one is wrong. Third, one of the benefits of FDCs is improving patient compliance by reducing the number of pills a patient has to take. Obviously, patient will not have to take multiple pills. Only one pill will work. That's why we brought this FDC. So third statement is absolutely right. Fourth, FDCs are commonly used in the treatment of conditions like tuberculosis and diabetes. That is also true. So the answer will be 1, 3 and 4. That is B. Now the next, question number 4 regarding Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. First, he pioneered guerrilla warfare tactics, enabling his smaller forces to defeat larger armies, obviously. Second, his coronation as Chhatrapati marked the foundation of a sovereign Maratha state at Raigad Fort in 1674. That is also true. Third, Shivaji Maharaj's naval power was solely focused on defending Maratha kingdom against Mughal Empire. Now this is very tricky. Mughal Empire was not attacking through navy. It was Portuguese or Britishers who had navy. So this Mughal one is wrong. So this statement is wrong. And fourth, he promoted the use of Hindi and Persian in his court and administration to foster regional pride and identity. He did not go for Hindi or Persian, rather Marathi and Sanskrit. So this statement is also wrong. So answer will be A, 1 and 2. The next question, which of the following statements correctly describe a key provision of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002? First, the act primarily targets only drug trafficking related money laundering activities. No, it has nothing to do with only drug trafficking. Rather, all the money laundering activities will be part of it. So this one is wrong. Second, under PMLA, the properties involved in money laundering can be attached only after the trial. No, not only after the trial. Rather, before the completion of the trial also it can be done. So this one is wrong. Third, the act shifts the burden of proof to the accused requiring them to prove that their assets are not connected to any criminal activity. This is true. We said that burden of proof lies with the accused under PMLA. So third one is right. And bail under PMLA is easier to obtain compared to other financial crime related laws. No, it's very stringent, very strict. So C is the right answer for this. Now, the mains practice question. It says, evaluate the impact of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana on financial inclusion in India. So they have asked about impact. And second, what are the key challenges that need to be addressed to ensure its long-term success? So these 2 points should be there as part of your answer. What you will do, first start with Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, mention the date or what was the motive of government to bring financial inclusion. You can also draw the diagram related to that JAM Trinity over here. After that, you need to mention the impact, and in the impact, talk about the achievements. For example, the data that we have discussed already related to how many accounts have already been created, how women empowerment is getting there. So all of this you can mention. Then go for the challenges. What are the challenges or risks associated with it? For example, over-indebtedness or consumer protection related issues. This you can mention. But after mentioning challenges, you should mention some kind of way forward. Give some kind of solution also. So tell them that you need to go for a next phase wherein you focus on the real empowerment of individuals. So you can promote entrepreneurship, and you need to ensure that Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana becomes a key pillar of India's financial inclusion. Okay? So I hope you liked the video. After this, if you have any kind of doubts or if you want to get many updates on this, please reach out to us through this YouTube channel of Narayana IAS. Please like, share and subscribe. Thank you.